But one thing that I think is a myth is the idea that dealers are an impediment to change.
The amount of leads that come into a dealership that aren't even responded to is still around 50%.
I am such a podcast junkie, like there's automotive stuff, geopolitics. I mean, I'm a huge Ian Bremer addict. I think what we wanted to do with the CART study is get a sense of challenges, opportunities, level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction that both dealers were feeling and also end users within the store and what they were feeling.
Welcome back to this week's Gear Change episode of the Drivetime podcast. I'm joined again in the studio by Niel Hiscox from Universus Media and Clarify. You're going to love this episode. Stay tuned. So Niel, thank you for staying with me for this Gear Change episode of the Drivetime podcast. What we do in this episode is try and just bring out some of the key takeouts from the main episode and also do a little bit of myth busting. So we're in Toronto this week. We are here for a number of events. For anyone that didn't see the main episode, Niel Hiscox, CEO of Clarify and Universus. So not only do you act as PR agencies for the OEMs, but you're also researching customer experience as well. So you wear many hats, but the biggest hat that you wear for me is you kind of MC the whole CADA summit and like bring together with CADA all of those kind of experts, thought leaders across Canada. So it'd be great just to kind of extract what we're expecting this week from that event and what we're looking forward to.
Well, we are hot on the heels of the release of the Canadian government's automotive strategy. It really was just released last week. So that's going to be very much a part of it, because I think, starting with the deal that was announced with China, where we're now going to be bringing in a small segment, but a segment I certainly expect to continue to see grow and likely tied to manufacturing commitments and that sort of thing. But now there's some more detail around it. The CADA and the other industry associations had been pushing for really as soon as Carney got into government to say, look, this ZEV mandate that's in place, the 2035 mandate, it ain't going to work. And happily, what we've seen is, so first the government put it on pause, and now the government has said, yeah, you're right, we need to rethink the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good to see. And I think a lot of the different elements and the is going to be a big part of the talk at the summit for sure.
Yeah. So it sounds like the administration is working really hand in hand with the industry and listening to what the industry needs it to do to support sustainability, growth, diversification, all of those things, which is
I think it is. I think, of course, part of the challenge, and I often don't envy the job, is you have stakeholders that you have to listen to that want to pull you in completely different directions. And sometimes what you have to do is compromise. And, it's, you may recall that, Carney has long had the position of the reputation, and I think the substantiated reputation of being quite green in his leanings. And, you're starting to see those who want to push back against some of the elements of the new auto strategy. So, for instance, stepping away from the ZEV mandate are saying, well, wait a sec, so much for your green credentials. But I think there has to be a recognition. It is a balancing act. And I think the government is trying to strike a balance or trying to walk a line that in many ways, it's very hard to see where that path is.
Yeah. The industry employs a lot of people and actually invests heavily in innovation and technology. And that's the thing that obviously I get very excited about, is how technology is completely shaping not only how we buy and use vehicles and then create loyalty, but also what happens inside the vehicle. There's an amazing amount of tech coming out of the industry. The software in the vehicle will kind of determine how we live and how we live with those vehicles and use them. So the other thing we always try and do in this episode is like some myth busting, and you've done a lot of research around. You talked about the CART study in the main episode, which is the retail. Just explain what the CART study is.
So we all know that at the retailer level, they have a very, very complicated tech stack. There's an awful lot of different pieces of software and technology that come together to try to deliver the totality of the dealership experience. So, it may be supporting the front end of the store in sales and F&I and service, the DMS, the CRM, website platforms, outbound marketing, you know, it's a very, very complicated tech stack. And so I think what we wanted to do with the CART study is get a sense of challenges, opportunities, level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction that both dealers were feeling as it relates to their tech stack, and also end users within the store and what they were feeling.
Yeah.
It was fascinating because I think in some ways it validated things that we probably suspected, but we now know for sure and we're able to quantify.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over the next few years because it is intended to be an annual study. So
I think we're keen to kind of, I mean, from obviously the space we operate in touches very much on automotive retail. So actually how you bring together that customer experience from a front end, from early inquiry. I don't know whether you see the data around this, Niel, but we still see, and it surprises me that we still haven't managed to get this right, the amount of leads that come into a dealership that aren't even responded to is still around 50% that are just lost leads. So either the retailer doesn't have enough resource, they're not quite sure whether those leads are real or not, but are you seeing a similar trend?
Well, I think it's certainly both of the things you just touched on, I think are part of it. I mean, one, there are lead sources coming in from all over the place, whether it be, you know, your website, your outbound marketing, your OEM, there's
marketplaces,
all sorts of places. And, you know, one of the great challenges inside the dealership is I think for the most part, stores are not at a point where they say, hey, we've got a real customer data lake where, you know, Jacqui is in there once, there's only one Jacqui, and that Jacqui, whether it's interacting with service or because they're not there, I think it is a real challenge. So depending on where a lead is coming from, how it gets acted on, how seriously it's treated, how much it's felt to be valid or junk. I mean, you know, and I think it probably has to, on one level, start with that proper data foundation. But that's a hard thing to migrate to. And quite frankly, it's not necessarily something that your technology vendors and partners may not in any way maliciously, but that they don't necessarily make it easier to get there.
No. I mean, accepted. I think that's something that the space we've come from being just DMS, it meant that you had everything else then had to like fit into and around it. So trying to get to a place where you can do either have systems that do multiple jobs or have systems that have multiple integrations that allow that data to flow into and out of. And it's event driven and it's API based. So you can actually have this thing has changed over here, which means that thing notifies this thing that it's changed and this thing then also gets the update. That's the kind of wouldn't it be great if everything just updates automatically, which it should because software can do that. And
we're seeing, on all levels, we're seeing really cool things going on from an API standpoint. Like one thing I just started playing with is within the app section on ChatGPT. Use Photoshop as an example. I mean, I've had Photoshop on a computer forever and used Photoshop, but actually now for a lot of the things you might want to do, cleaning up, removing a background, you know, changing some of the tints and the light and the focus, you actually can simply go into ChatGPT, pull a photo in, and do those things from a text prompt. So what's actually doing the work is Photoshop, but you actually don't need to know how to do it.
You can write the prompt.
And so, you know, there's just a simple and very non-automotive example of where, you know, we are starting to see at the API layer really, really exciting integrations that all of a sudden things that did require multiple logins or felt hard are getting a lot easier. I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
100% we're going to see a lot of AI. I mean, for us, it's how does AI accelerate coding, integrations, localizations, all of those things that you do at once. You can then automate the rollout across many markets. It gets just much, much faster. So again, the biggest myth then, Niel, what in your experience are kind of some of the myths that you think are total myths around automotive technology that you think we're talking about this now, that doesn't exist anymore, that's no longer a problem? What can you kind of shine a light on that's kind of myth busting?
Well, one that comes to mind and you know, recognizing some of the things I do during the day. I mean, I spend a lot of time with dealers and advocating for dealers. But one thing that I think is a myth is the idea that dealers are an impediment to change.
Yes.
As we've talked about, we're moving from, the pendulum swinging all the way to EV to sort of more of a hybrid focus, whether it be plug-in or traditional or extended range. But certainly there's been a lot of chatter over the last number of years that, the dealers are resistant to this. They're EV resistant. I think that's a myth. I think, what I see when I talk to dealers, whether it be technology change, whether it be now as we're sort of gazing across at the mix of Chinese OEMs and pondering who's going to be here and what the opportunity may be, I find dealers they're excited. They want to understand how to do it. They want to, of course, everybody has a predisposition to, if you've got a floor plan expensed against a vehicle on your lot, you want to try to sell the vehicle on your lot. But I think that's an important myth, because at a time when so much is changing in the industry, I see dealers more than anything really trying to understand how to prepare their businesses to pivot and to change and to adapt, including to changes that aren't fully yet quantified.
Yeah, I think you're right. So one thing we always ask every guest on this podcast, Niel, is a couple of things like innovations you're excited about. I think we've covered a number of those, but also we also talk about travel, because you travel a lot. You kind of not only within Canada, but also globally. You mentioned China. You're going down to Barbados in a couple of weeks. Very lucky you, because your family have a place down there, which is great. But in terms of dream road trip destination, you're coming to London in a couple of months. But where, either somewhere you've been or somewhere that you really want to go is on your list you haven't been yet, where would you like to kind of go?
I definitely want to get back to China. Was in China last year, and I'm really eager to get back there. But I think for a road trip, when Ewan McGregor and Charlie did the original Long Way Around, and they took the motorcycle trip down through South and Central America, I just looked at that and I thought,
yeah. Now, the long way down, the long way round.
Yeah, one was across to Russia, one was down. But I would love to go down through to the bottom of the Americas. I was in Nicaragua last year and had a chance to explore a little bit of the countryside, as well as a couple of the towns and cities, and it was really cool. And I'm probably old enough that I would take the comfort of a convertible over a motorcycle, but that's a trip I would love to do.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. The kind of, and what would you do it in? And I think the convertible thing is a great, it feels really like freedom. It just feels really exciting, doesn't it? Doing it, especially in warmer weather, not here, because you couldn't. I'm
a great believer that a car's roof should be made of fabric.
Yeah, that's a really good, honestly, it's great. And then you're on your road trip. What are you going to listen to? Apart from podcasts, clearly, but what else are you going to listen to?
Well, actually, that is it. It's like an endless list of, I am such a podcast junkie, like there's certainly automotive stuff, geopolitics. I mean, I'm a huge Ian Bremmer addict with G0 Media, huge Scott Galloway addict.
Yeah, he's interesting, a really interesting guy, the stuff that he's talking about.
He's a fascinating guy. Ezra Klein with the whole abundance thing, I thought is really interesting. But it's for me, that podcast library is
expansive.
I spend way more time there than I do in my music library. Really? Yeah.
We were talking about iPods earlier on, but in the music library, is there one thing that's your go-to that you kind of throw on a Friday night?
Probably, honestly, there's no question that I'm a sucker for what certainly my kids would think of as ancient music, we'll sometimes throw a bunch of 80s stuff on, particularly a lot of the British tech pop from the 80s, and put that on the background. New York Times crossword on the iPad in the foreground, half decent bottle of wine. That's a pretty perfect Friday night.
So my top tip for you when you come to England in April, there is a radio station called Absolute 80s. It's brilliant. It's literally wall to wall 80s music. So find Absolute 80s on the TV channel. It's on the TV or on a phone or anything. And you can have 80s music to to your heart's content.
Yeah, some of the old the British tech pop stuff is pretty cool.
It's really good. We did sort of catch a bit of the halftime show last night with the Bad Bunny thing, and I was like, I've never heard of this guy. I'm too old. I'm also like you. I have ancient music in my iTunes library or Spotify, but that's it. But I'm like, I'm okay with that. It's fine. Yeah. So Niel Hiscox, thanks again so much for staying with me for this Gear Change episode. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to spend time with you while I'm in town. So.
My pleasure. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks again to Niel Hiscox for joining me here in Toronto as we're here for a number of Canadian automotive events. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like, follow and subscribe. You'll never miss an episode of the Drivetime podcast.